Hey everyone, for our next session, we have Chandler from UMA, who'll be doing a talk on creating the next generation of smarter rewards. And I'll let him take it from here.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to get to talk through the next generation of rewards and what we've been working up at UMA for the last couple weeks. I'm Chandler. I lead the growth at UMA. And yeah, so before I get into kind of what I wanted to talk about today, today's a story of two tales. One is the story of UMA, and the next will be about outcome finance, which we'll get into a little bit later in the course. But this is the story of how UMA entered into the reward space and how we envision outcome finance, taking that next phase in creating positive outcomes for DAOs. A little bit about the talk that I want to do today. I want to be introducing the idea of KPI options, where kind of our reward thesis came from. Talk about what these options are, how are people using these options, introduction of outcome, what's next for outcome, and how we can get people designing their own KPI options today. I also want to touch on a new initiative that we're running through Outcome called the Outcome Gang. A big backdrop, and I think this is kind of important for anyone in the DeFi space and anyone particularly interested in launching their own protocol today, is this concept of rewards. And what is actually a reward? A reward is anything that you do on-chain, sometimes off-chain, and you do this action and you can get a reward. These rewards can be expected, liquidity mining incentives, bounties, to just name a few. These types of rewards that are expected are kind of interesting because somebody knows what's up front, what's expected of them. You can kind of manipulate behavior in that way. Or they can somewhat be unexpected, airdrops, retroactive rewards. And what we've been noticing over a short period of time is that some of even these unexpected rewards are becoming expected. Almost every new token needs to have some sort of airdrop. Some of the criteria on airdrops are becoming increasingly gameable, and there's hundreds of lists out there where you can figure out what actions you need to do to be eligible for airdrops. And so this changes the unexpected nature and the effect of having some sort of reward given to you unexpectedly be some sort of game that people can play around. And while this behavior might seem kind of doom and gloom, there are different ways of kind of approaching a reward mechanism where we can play around with having this unexpected element that turning into an expected element really play into what DAOs can kind of use today to create a more smart and a better created incentive mechanism reward. So this is where I want to introduce a KPI option. So a KPI option was a concept that UMA came up with mid-2021. And very simply, a KPI option is a token that pays out rewards based on some sort of metric. The example that we like to use is actually the inaugural KPI option that the UMA team created. And this option we based on our TVL. So we set a TVL target. We minted a bunch of these KPI options, which was collateralized in our own token, and each of the options would pay out based on how closely or far away from the target that we wanted to, how close or far from the target we actually were. And so 7,000 users got airdropped this option. So instead of getting the token, they got this KPI option. A lot of them asked what was up around getting this weird token, and we kind of put out some explainers what this meant. And at the end of the program, what we found was that we increased our TVL by 2.5x, which was quite great at the time. Some of that was bull market elements. Some of that was also just the fact that the KPI option program was working. And we have some sort of more details around the retro, but I don't really want to delve into what our options were about. I really want to go into some of why these options became some sort of like tectonic shift within the way we think about rewards for communities and stakeholders. And that really is just that you as a protocol want to reward certain behaviors and incentivize certain actions. Those incentives typically have gamified elements, liquidity mining. You just dump a bunch of capital into a contract, you farm the rewards. Once you're done, pull out your liquidity and you dump the farmed rewards. That really doesn't make your protocol any more sticky. It doesn't make people actually want to continue to be part of that. And while the mechanics of liquidity mining still has a little bit of work to do, what you can kind of see with what a KPI option kind of program can do is that you can give these tokens to your community. Your community would then have an incentive to try and help you as a protocol increase your metric. Now, that whole concept, even outside just the example of liquidity mining, has a lot of ramifications on how you can bring your communities, stakeholders, or anyone that really can move the needle within your ecosystem and your DAO to greater heights. And that aligned community incentives is something that DeFi has been missing for a while. And that part of using KPI options has been what we've seen other protocols employ in equally successful programs. So what are some of the options that we've seen being created? The simple answer I like to give is that KPI options are as flexible as you are creative. What this means in practice is that you as a protocol want to create an incentive reward program, and you can get as interesting and mechanically as complex as you'd want to in that design process. And kind of the mechanics that you create in that are really just as kind of creative as what you want your that you can kind of put behind them. But we've had a few examples that have been successful. So liquidity mining 2.0, this is actually something that we've seen be successful in making sure that liquidity incentives programs aren't just pump and dumped. Integration incentives, where you can incentivize your community to like bring new types of integrations into your ecosystem, bring different types of new products, kind of be a little bit more of a exploratory top of the funnel SaaS group for what your ecosystem might need. And these are currently the implementation the implementation of KPI options that the UMA team is running as we speak. We currently have an integration incentive, and our community members that hold these KPI options will get a better reward the more integrations they bring into the ecosystem. We're also seeing an increasing number of teams still focusing on TVL as their most important metric. So these TVL boosters are something that still happens to this day within the KPI option program. In fact, what was quite interesting about our own TVL booster incentivized program is it really has paved the way for other teams to kind of make the concept of having TVL be their North Star metric, But more generally, these KPI options are there to incentivize certain behaviors. So you want to make sure that the behaviors of your community are directed and focused at helping you as a protocol grow, and that community member in turn, or that group of community members in turn, are rewarded in your own success. And I think that's a powerful mechanic to kind of just take a second to think about. Your community gets more rewards when you are successful, and building out mechanics that help you decide what your most important metric of success is and who the community members that actually can help you achieve that success is an important part for DeFi platforms moving forward. So what's next? What can we kind of like expect for KPI options moving forward? Now, KPI options is a very simple contract, and it works relatively simply. And really, the interesting part of what KPI options can do is more interesting if we can kind of have a champion that actually brings the value of KPI options to more people. This is where outcome comes in. This is where the separation from where we were currently known as UMA launching these KPI options. We're making the clear distinction that UMA will be focusing on optimistic oracles and designing optimistic style systems where our oracle can help empower a whole like wide range of products in the DeFi space, of which one we think outcome will be one of them. So this is where I'm going to introduce outcome. Outcome will take control and steer the ship of our smart rewards program. We're going to be kind of playing around with a few concepts, but essentially it'll be a smart reward program or rewards as a service program, and it'll be powered by the UMA's optimistic oracle. I'll talk a bit more on how those two elements tie in, but conceptually, Outcome is a completely separate brand. It's a separate entity, and its focus and its vision is to create positive outcomes for DAOs. And what do we mean by this? What do we mean by creating these positive outcomes for DAOs? Really ties into the fact that smarter mechanics, smarter rewards, smarter, I do this action, I get this reward, but I get this reward and I'm willing to also want to contribute more to the protocol, are some of the design mechanics that we think about when designing products at Outcome. So elements that tie into this are some sort of behavioral economics, some sort of like mechanics design, incentive programs. Outcome really wants to focus on making sure that what we as protocols want to try and incentivize, that we actually get those results. And some of the experiments that have played out in the space would have benefited from a lot of the work that's going into Outcome at the moment. So taking the next step is something that's quite interesting, and I'm extremely excited to actually talk about. Outcome started as the concept of taking UMA's KPI option and kind of running with that concept of rewarding people for creating aligned incentives with their community. But we can take this concept so much further. Creating positive outcomes for DAOs means more than just rewards. It means more than just smart token distributions. Where we actually think that Outcome has a positive impact in the world is so much more than just the KPI option. We have these tokens called success tokens. They're a similar spin to KPI options, but we found an interesting niche where these success tokens align your investor with your project. So not only do you as a project need to worry about making sure that your community is aligned with what you're up to, and especially in a decentralized or DAO sense where there is no single figurehead, you also want to make sure that the investors that invest in you have the right incentives to make sure that they have a longer term view with your project. So this is where the success token comes in. This is actually something that we've also worked under the UMA umbrella, and that product has actually been used successfully by a bunch of DAOs at the moment. Shapeshift being one that's actually used the success token quite recently. Again, if you have any questions around some of these elements, I'll kind of direct you to the Medium page where you can find more information on that. The other two are things that we haven't actually spoken about, so a little bit of inside information on what we've been working on, but this concept of optimistic governance and making voting a lot easier, a lot more efficient. Voting structures at the moment are they arrive at the same consensus at how a blockchain would work, where you have loosely how a blockchain would work, where you'd have a bunch of people agree that the state is vote on yes or no that the state is actually the state that the DAO should be in, and then ultimately that vote gets passed and actioned. What we think is a more interesting dynamic is to use optimistic consensus mechanisms for governance, where instead of having everyone agree, which is tiresome, you get voter apathy, you get voters don't show up, voters actually also don't care, and at some point your governance system starts taking quorum issues. We can assume that any proposal worth its weight is worth putting through, and all you really need to do to make sure that vote goes through is that no one disagrees. And so the cognitive load for anyone to kind of not have to worry about the important votes or the kind of stock standard admin votes makes them really just get interested and kind of focus on just those really important votes. So the optimistic governor is something that we're very interested in kind of continuing to develop. We're seeing quite a valuable partnership pipeline come through on the optimistic governor, and you'll hear more about that soon. The next one is the optimistic distributor. This is what we think of as a perpetual version of KPI options. So in KPI options V1, the rewards had to be unlocked for a particular person at some point in time. And that meant that once those rewards were unlocked, that program basically ended and you would have to restart them. New contract, new program every single time. And that became a clunky UX for teams that really wanted to have some sort of continuous reward mechanism. And this is where we come in with the optimistic distributor. It's still very much in development at the moment, and it's going to become some sort of like infrastructure play with what we wanting to do with it. But really, it's a concept of being able to distribute rewards in an optimistic fashion to contributors and users. And this concept is actually, we're currently in development with a product at the moment. And again, you'll hear a little bit more about that fairly soon. So there's a little bit of inside leaks on what's to come from Outcome. And yeah, keep your eyes peeled on that. Next question, I think a lot of people think about is how easy is it to create some of these options? And the very simple answer is it's actually very easy. A lot of the thought that goes into a KPI option program really is around mechanism design, and that's to choose your metric. The first question you really ask a DAO is, what is your metric that you want to incentivize for your DAO? And when you ask some people that question, it's actually quite interesting that not many of them have a very clear answer to that. So I think it's a very good a soul-searching element for DAOs on figuring out what is the thing that makes your DAO or a proxy for a measure of success for your DAO. The next one is really to just figure out a payout function. I want to incentivize this metric. How many rewards am I going to put out at the top end, at the middle end, at the low end? How does that payout function work? Is it binary? Is it linear? Is it some sort of escalating function? Is it stepwise? Figuring out like if we reach X metric, we get Y rewards. Figuring that part out is there's some kind of sort of interesting design patterns there. And then the last one, and again one of the more important ones, is figuring out your distribution. Where do these options go? Who do you give them to? Who can move the needle? How do you plan on distributing these tokens? There are a lot of methodologies that you can play around here, and this is something that the outcome team can give a bit of advice about. Do you do a wide distribution? Do a very narrow distribution? How do you distribute these options in a way that makes sense? And that's really just the thoughts that you need to be thinking about when figuring out KPI options and how do you want to use them in your space. The next bit of kind of nice a niche part is that all the code is not needed. Really, everything we've done is no code, and all the details on how to run a program will kind of, you can talk to the outcome team to help you out. But these are just ERC20 tokens that you manage, and they have these embedded payout functions within them. The last thing on why this isn't kind of important and why UMA's kind of powering Outcome and it's being spun out of UMA is that UMA's optimistic oracle really just enables the flexibility of asking a question. Asking the question, how did this DAO's metric perform at this point in time? There isn't really any oracle in the space that can do that sort of flexible question and answer. There is no oracle that can do it in a quick and easy way. These are the things that we at the outcome team are really excited about, on just how flexible you can get about your metrics. And I really, at this point, think it's the best protocol using optimistic design patterns to help DAOs. The next thing is that we also know that everything that we're doing at UMA and at Outcome involves doing this at an industry-wide level. So the outcome mission of making positive outcomes for DAOs is not a single mission. We're not taking this on by ourselves, and we've got a few friends to join us along the way. So part of Outcome is to launch the Outcome Gang. This is a permissionless group of Web3 partners that have similar type products that are focused on just building good infrastructure and DAO tooling to help DAOs just be better at what they do. And Outcome will help coordinate these teams to build cool things at a cross-team level, at a kind of multiple team level. We can kind of work on a couple product streams And the concept here is that we want to bring these partners together to help form Lego blocks that we then use to build Lego blocks on top of, where we can kind of do cross-chain, cross product building. We find that this is actually not only inspiring and interesting, but also yields some of the more innovative products in the space at the moment. So if you want to be part of the Outcome Gang, also reach out. The DAOs listed below are currently the ones that are part of the initial group of the Outcome Gang. And if you're interested in being part of helping shape the future of DAO tooling, then by all means, reach out to me. So you can reach out to me on Twitter. You can also reach out to me at Outcome Finance. And for support, you can reach out to me at Telegram, and we can get you in contact with the right people at our Outcome team and kind of get you on your journey on reaching positive outcomes for your DAO.
Thanks, Chandler. This was really great. We're going to transition to the next session now.
Fantastic.